But after studying the nominee's record and watching her performance this week, I cannot and will not support Judge Jackson for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. First, Judge Jackson refuses to reject the fringe position that Democrats should try to pack the Supreme Court. Justice Ginsburg and Justice Breyer had no problem denouncing this unpopular view and defending their institution. I assumed this would be an easy softball for Judge Jackson, but it wasn't. The nominee suggested there are two legitimate sides to the issue. She testified she has a view on the matter, but would not share it.
You're telling me you don't have an opinion about packing the United States Supreme Court?
Senator, I have opinions about a lot of things. I don't have an opinion that I think it appropriate to share.
She inaccurately compared her non-answer to a different, narrower question that a prior nominee was asked.
Something that other nominees, Justice Barrett was asked about the same sort of thing and also declined to give her opinion.
But Judge Jackson seemingly actually tipped her hand. She said she would be, quote, thrilled to be one of however many, the opposite of Ginsburg and Breyer sentiment.
Well, in deciding to join the United States Supreme Court, if you're affirmed, wouldn't it make a difference to you whether you're one of 9 or one of 28?
Would it make a difference?
That impacts the judiciary? That involves the judiciary?
Senator, it certainly involves the judiciary. I would be thrilled to be one of however many Congress thought it appropriate to put on the court.
Okay. So you'd be okay if it was 28?
If that's Congress's determination, yes. Congress makes political decisions like that.
The most radical pro-court packing fringe groups badly wanted this nominee for this vacancy. Judge Jackson was the court packer's pick, and she testified like it. I'll conclude with this. Late on Tuesday, after hours of questioning, I believe we may have witnessed a telling moment. Under questioning about judicial activism, Judge Jackson bluntly said this, quote, Judge Jackson said, well, anytime the Supreme Court has 5 votes, then they have a majority for whatever opinion they determine, end quote. One senator simply asked the judge to summarize well-known differences between the approaches of some current justices. The nominee replied that 2 weeks' notice had not been enough to prepare an answer. President Biden said he would only nominate a judicial activist. Unfortunately, we saw no reason to suspect that he accidentally did the opposite. Second, for decades, activist judges have hurt the country by trying to make policy from the bench. This has made judicial philosophy a key qualification that senators must consider. President Biden stated he would only appoint a Supreme Court justice with a specific approach that is neither textualist nor originalist. That's the president's litmus test. No strict constructionist need apply. And that president picked Judge Jackson. If the nominee had a paper trail on constitutional issues, perhaps it could reassure us, but she doesn't. When Justice Gorsuch was nominated to the Supreme Court, he'd written more than 200 circuit court opinions that senators could actually study. Justice Kavanaugh had written more than 300. Justice Barrett outpaced them both. She wrote almost 100 appellate opinions in just 3 years, plus years of scholarship as a star professor that senators could actually examine. Judge Jackson has been on the D.C. Circuit for less than a year. He's published only 2 opinions. Beforehand, Judge Jackson served as a trial judge on the district court. She testified on Tuesday that that role did not provide many opportunities to think about constitutional interpretation. Yet when senators tried to dig in on judicial philosophy, the judge deflected and pointed back to the same record she acknowledged would not shed much light. One senator simply asked the judge to summarize well-known differences between the approaches of some current justices. The nominee replied that 2 weeks' notice had not been enough to prepare an answer. President Biden said he would only nominate a judicial activist. Unfortunately, we saw no reason to suspect that he accidentally did the opposite. Third, this is one area where Judge Jackson's trial court records provide a wealth of information, and it is troubling indeed that we're beneath the sentencing guidelines and beneath the prosecutor's requests. The judge herself this week used the phrase policy disagreement to describe this subject. The issue isn't just the sentences, it's also the judge's rhetoric and trial transcript and the creative ways she actually bent the law. In one instance, Judge Jackson used COVID as a pretext to essentially rewrite. Judge Jackson declined to walk senators through the merits of her reasoning in specific cases. She just kept repeating that it was her discretion, and if Congress didn't like it, it was our fault for giving her the discretion. That is hardly an explanation as to why she uses her discretion the way she does. That response seems to confirm that deeply held personal policy views seep into her jurisprudence, and that is exactly what the record suggests. I'll conclude with this. Late on Tuesday, after hours of questioning, I believe we may have witnessed a telling moment. Under questioning about judicial activism, Judge Jackson bluntly said this, quote, Judge Jackson said, well, anytime the Supreme Court has 5 votes, then they have a majority for whatever opinion they determine, end quote. That isn't just a factual observation. It is a clear echo of a famous quotation from perhaps the most famous judicial activist of all time, the arch-liberal William Brennan. The late Justice Brennan told people the most important rule in constitutional law was the rule of 5. With 5 votes, a majority can do whatever it wants. That's a perfect summary of judicial activism. It's a recipe for courts to wander into policymaking and prevent healthy democratic compromise. This is the misunderstanding of the separation of powers that I've spent my entire career fighting against. But President Biden made that misunderstanding his litmus test. And nothing we saw this week convinced me that either President Biden or Judge Jackson's deeply invested far-left fan club have misjudged her. I will vote against this nominee